Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is the Washington State Building Code Council IBC Technical Advisory Group for Thursday, November 20th, 2025. Could we please take roll?
Todd Byrather,
Here.
Roger Haringa, not seen online. Joe Mayo, not seen online. Che Fortaleza, not seen online. Tim Woodard,
Present.
thank you. Steve Belzak, seen online. Lance Dahl, not online. Hoyt Jeter, not online. Sean Karlstrom,
I'm here.
thank you. Todd Sullivan, not seen online. Bill Mybush, not seen online. Brian Horstman, not seen online. Josh Mergens,
Present.
thank you. Trent Tinney, not online. Michael Shaw, not online. Brett Conway is not online. Michael Barth, I see Michael online.
I'm here. I was having trouble unmuting.
No worries. Thank you. Leah Summer, not seeing online. Paul Clark,
Here.
Andy Leonto, not seeing online. Let me just run back through. So we're shy of a quorum by 2 seats at the moment. I'm just doing a quick another review to see if anybody's popped in that I missed there.
Okay, well, we'll monitor.
Yep,
Um,
see
hey,
anybody.
that makes it easier. We're going to jump right into the discussion then. We won't be able to take any action. So our goal is to, start making progress now on this. I think we've set up the problem pretty well. Sorry we missed last week. We had some difficulties that we just called the meeting. So today we'll talk about the dwelling unit size, and then if we can get to it, the council pushed down you'll see the child care centers area calculation there. So oh, I'm sorry, that's not the one the council pushed down. Is that a different opinion?
No, that's not an opinion. It's an opinion, yes, but it was pushed this way by the BFRW at
Okay,
that last meeting.
that's what I was forgetting. Okay, it's been a few days only. Okay, so this week we're going to pick up the dwelling unit size. Dustin, I think the best thing to do, we have that spreadsheet? Is that the best way to go and start talking about?
Yeah, and since I posted, I've done a little bit more work on this one to try
Okay,
to make it a little bit more friendly for us to use. I tried to reorganize it so that things are flowing in the order of our code book and tried to assign the code numbers to these sections here. Throughout our conversations, I haven't had a whole lot to add to this one. So for the most part, the topics that we're discussing are directly related to the code sections in section 1208 as we get here. So sections that don't have numbers, we don't have specific code sections that address those topics, but I think I have them couched underneath the sections that would address those. And as we discuss, we can potentially make pointers elsewhere as we run through these. So we have reviewed the state amendment. Our consensus there is that it doesn't meet the legislative requirements. That one was going to relate back down to this dwelling unit size in section 1208.3. And right now, the minimum efficiency dwelling unit size is 190 square feet. And that's a kind of a grouping of some areas, so it's not specifically spelled out like that, but if we interpret it, it adds up to 190 square feet. And then we have to reduce below that number somewhere, and we haven't identified a number as a target just yet.
okay.
Looking to that.
Okay, so I think yeah, thank you for that. It's been a couple weeks since we've reviewed this, but I think where we may my memory was we got to a good point where we were understanding the existing references, and I think we should now start to really zero in on what the requirements are, and then keep referring back to these other references, either in the code or other references. So, throwing out a couple topics, we we went maybe should review, the life safety concerns we had. I don't recall that those were severe in our last conversation, but maybe we'll start there. Let's talk about livability, sanitation, and then I think we brought up some other topics on more well-being, like ventilation, daylight, things like that. So if we can kind of in words, and if we need to add more items here, let's do that. But let's talk it through in words what we're trying to achieve, what those requirements are. So anyone want to start on any topic? What I may be trying to have us avoid is start debating room area just for the sake of picking a number before we can establish what we're trying to achieve. Anyone want to, or does anyone not want to take that approach? Maybe I'll put it that way. I mean, I would argue we need a place to sleep. So let's talk about that. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay, so this is Tim. I guess my thought on the looking at it from a life safety angle is it doesn't really mesh because there's been no direction given to us to reduce the life safety elements. So I think no matter what, we're still going to be in a situation where, if an egress window is required, most of these type of structures that they'd put them in would probably try to comply with the exception for egress windows. But egress windows, minimum door sizes, fire alarm systems, sprinkler systems, ventilation, sanitation. From my understanding, those are not being requested to be reduced, nor I hope nobody wants to reduce those requirements.
I think it's a good opening statement there, Tim, because I hope not too. But does anyone think differently about that? I agree with your statement.
Okay.
Anyone think we have a different task? Okay. So that gives us a good baseline on many things. What things would not be included in that are unique to this? Because we have talked about, I don't think we were using the term relief here, but maybe it's relief. When we're talking about the cooking, essentially, I'm just going to try to use verbs where I can, but we can put the technical terms in. Do we need a stovetop? What do we need? Because I think that starts to really tie us back to then what types of ventilation or exhaust or things like that, right? Systems we would need. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, if we're looking for just kind of opening up the conversation, narrowing down to a few topics, and we kind of keep running around the same sort of armload of things. I think that's what we're trying to get at is, okay, let's pick what we're tackling. I don't know if anyone had the opportunity to look at, but I sent out that marked up table of contents from the NHHS document of what I was proposing we would do for this, and I was hoping to use that as a talking point last meeting, but I think we ran short on time, so we had sent it out, and I don't know if anyone's looked at it. I'm happy to share my screen if we want somewhere to start, or we can kind of keep the open conversation, but
I think it's a great idea. I did look at it. I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay, perfect. Let me go ahead and share that screen. So my thought with doing this is taking something that's generally aiming at the same goal and figuring out how we're going to force this or shoehorn it into IBC without creating any issues. So the sections I've crossed out are ones that I think don't affect anything. So like what Tim was pointing out, things like smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, guards, store, all those things. I don't think those really change for our purposes right now. I think those are minimum safety standards we want to keep. So some of the items I had listed that weren't necessarily crossed out, things like, and maybe plumbing system doesn't quite fall in here, but what do we need for a kitchen? What items do we need in there? And this has a section for, I guess this document I have open is just the table of contents, but there's a section that we could look at for what they're proposing for a kitchen compared to IBC and see where there's appropriate relief from this document versus what's actually in the IBC. So my proposal would be we kind of are picking these to have people do a review similar to what we had done for the IBC and IRC tags, where we're looking at existing amendments and comparing them to new code language and seeing if we need any updates. But I'm really hoping to have the group kind of comment on some of this that we think is maybe inaccurate or that we should be looking at. And anything we should add. Like I had a couple additions from our last conversation. We talked about accessibility. How is accessibility potentially impacted by this, or is it not impacted by this? And if so, that may give us a good basis to develop some minimum areas, because there's minimum areas that are that would be dependent on accessibility requirements. And one thing that came up from the presentation we saw from, oh shoot, I'm forgetting the gentleman's name now. He did such a good job presenting for us. That's too bad. I don't have that in front of me. He mentioned having storage inclusions in living areas. So perhaps we need to define, are we including closets? Are we not including closets? Is it appropriate to include closets? And that could be one area for somebody to potentially look at. Like I said, safety and personal security. I don't think anyone here is proposing we change any of that. Lighting and electrical systems, to me, I don't see any need to adjust anything here, but that's outside my area of expertise. So if anyone want to jump in and tell me I'm wrong about lighting and electrical systems, and there's something that we ought to be considering that I'm not in the loop on.
No.
All right.
Okay.
Loving that so far. So then we can, unless anyone else comes up with something, we could probably cross that whole section off. Per the House bill, it looked like all energy code considerations were going to be handled by an external consultant. And I'm curious if anyone has any different opinion on that, but that was my read of the House bill. Doesn't seem like anyone's jumping up, but please do interrupt me if people know better. I'm recommending maintaining existing code provisions for moisture control, solid waste, and pest management. I don't see why smaller dwellings would have any less stringent requirements for moisture control, solid waste, or pest management, and similar with chemical and radiologic effects. So it really only leaves, the few items here. Do we need to consider anything for noise, minimum space, bathroom, kitchen, plumbing, system, facilities? Does accessibility change or is impacted by this? And maybe those who are plans examiners can help me better understand the limits of accessibility for a residential versus commercial building. I'm normally letting the architects handle that since I do the structural. And anything else we would want to add to this, but I think we can narrow it down to a couple of quick items and cross off some large swaths of code and say, great, we've got these items that we have recommendations from the NHHS. Let's compare these to our IBC provisions. And when we meet, we can go over our proposed edits to IBC language to better coincide with this code and the intents of the legislation. Oh, I see Tim has his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep, Tim. Jump in anytime. We can be more informal.
Okay. I'll go ahead and just lower my hand and just start jumping in. So just on a couple of the things that I see here, I think we can cross off hopefully more. Noise is already covered. I don't know why we would want less sound control in between units for if you're a smaller unit either. Similar argument is made on the other things. In regards to the accessibility, I don't believe we need to handle accessibility at all within this parameter, because we don't actually have the authority to reduce the accessibility, in my opinion, because this is IBC. And then in regards to the storage inclusion in living areas, I think maybe off base with this, but yes, it doesn't meet the habitable room or definition. So maybe what we really should be looking at is what we consider a habitable room. So it's more of whether or not we should allow storage units to be considered habitable spaces, which I don't think any of us are really proposing that. So although it was a great presentation and he walked us through the needs of somebody in a smaller unit, I don't know how we best regulate that. So I don't know if it's something we should be kind of focusing on.
So that does make good sense. I'd say the only thing that jumps out to me with the storage inclusion is and this is where we would have to maybe do a little more writing. I don't think we could directly say, oh, we're going to allow closets to be part of the dwelling area. But if we're adjusting parameters, we could maybe have some potentially reasonable offsets. If we're saying, okay, we're looking at all of our requirements, we just can't get this unit smaller. How can we do this in a way that still gives us good living? Maybe there can be a certain percentage can be used for storage if it meets a certain criteria. Maybe that's too into the weeds, and we put that in our back pocket until we have a challenge we need to solve. Quick follow-up on the accessibility too, just because I'm less knowledgeable in this area. Excuse me. We still are subject to the accessibility requirements. So those would give us some important minimum dimensions for, say, the restrooms. Is that fair, or would a dwelling like this not necessarily have? I mean, this is a private bathroom, so we wouldn't have the 60-inch diameter and all that kind of stuff. Is that correct, or am I mistaken there?
So what we deal with oftentimes during plan review is the exceptions to when you require accessible units. So if you have the time, 1108.7, that's where we always go.
Okay.
And the main thing is if you do not provide an elevator, you're not required to provide the accessible units. So most projects that want to avoid the accessible requirements, which is I'm sure where these smaller units would want to fall, is they don't provide an elevator, and then they don't have to put in any of those minimum dimensions for the accessibility, except for their main front entrance door into and out of the space.
Do we maybe want to have a statement, or is it appropriate to have a statement that what we're proposing is not intended for units meeting requirements for accessibility, just to clarify that what we may be proposing here may not necessarily be compatible with an accessible unit?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is after we go through this process, we're going to submit, or Dustin's going to help me out with vocabulary, but we're going to put something out there to accept proposals from people. Maybe within that proposal that we put out, we say that this doesn't need to be, we don't need to concern ourselves with accessibility on this. So that way our proposals don't try to address accessibility.
I mean, I like that. Anyone else have any thoughts that they want to jump in with? I think this is great, Tim. I really appreciate the blanks you're filling in for me here. But anyone else have thoughts they want to jump in, or should we kind of continue looking at trying to reduce this list?
I think it makes sense.
Like Barth, I'd chime in on the accessibility piece. It's, we're looking at so many different pieces of this. Is this a series of like townhouses where we have a bunch of these units put together and we call it R2, or are we talking about single family dwellings? When we talk about accessibility, generally your 1 and 2 family dwellings are going to be exempt. But if we're talking about a multifamily building here that has all these tiny group R2, then we're no longer exempt. And we do have to start considering the accessibility aspect of it, the type 1 requirements, the type 2. So while for this discussion, it's hard to throw accessibility in there because we really are trying to find what's simple. I don't think we can just throw the whole subject out without until it's further defined as to what type of overall unit or development we're talking about here. So
Hey, Michael, do you think for the exercise we could exclude it and try to get to an uncomfortable space that and what I mean by that is we kind of bring it all the way down to a space that we're all crossing thresholds that we're comfortable with, and then we can say, okay, now what does it look like to bring accessibility back into it?
absolutely, yeah, yes, I because obviously we're here, and that's what we're trying to do. I'm just bringing up the point because if we're talking about each dwelling unit, we're not necessarily talking about whether this is a big building with 20 of those dwelling units in it, or if we're doing little, like crate structures, that type. So yes, I just don't think we just can't rule it out I think we just do need to keep it in the back of our minds that depending on how these are situated, whether we need to consider accessibility or not.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we might have two solutions. Yeah. Okay, let's go to Hoyt.
Oh, I just wanted to say sorry. I was late. I got a brand new computer and I had problems. I thought it would just hook right up, but it didn't. So I apologize on that.
I'm doing the same today, so I feel yeah. Okay, go ahead, Micah.
Thanks, folks. I do think that what we're looking at is, I think Tim was mentioning, is we're not going to or evaluate accessibility right now, because of accessibility would come down to the design and scope of the project. We did a pretty extensive review of, if you look at some of the proposals, one of them, somebody submitted the small efficiency dwelling unit that Seattle had. You can actually fit a type A unit down in that 150 square foot space. It's going to come down to some modification, at least 150 square foot of habitable or occupiable space. The bathroom itself would have to be modified to be maybe larger, or even go to a wet bath type design for that 5'6" turnaround for a type A unit. And then type B unit's a little bit different. And then you get into other adaptable unit issues. But again, we did an evaluation of that. You can fit a type A down in that 150 square foot habitable space unit, with modifications in the bathroom. In other words, your floor plate is going to end up around 220 square feet or so. So again, I think you don't have to review the accessibility right now, because that's going to come down, and I think Mike said it great as well, was come down to design and project scope. You could get into having to provide type A's or type B's depending on the project, but I don't think that we need to evaluate that here. And if I'm hearing Tim correct, that's what you said, Tim, is we don't need to evaluate that now, because yes, it's relevant, but then it's not relevant, because you can provide as many of these small units as you want, is what the desire is. However, if you do trigger items out of Chapter 11 for accessibility, you're going to have to address those separately, regardless of the size that is allowed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Micah. Okay, let's go back to Joshua. No? Did you hit the red button?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You asking for me? I'm
No,
sorry.
go ahead, Hoyt.
Sorry,
I think Josh.
Oh,
I
okay.
lowered my hand instead of unmuting, apparently.
Oh, okay. Hey,
Sorry about that. Saying, hearing what everyone's saying regarding accessibility, would it be appropriate if maybe we had a statement in our proposal that, or in the final language even, that says these requirements do not exempt accessibility, just to say, hey, we're not saying we're getting out of it, but it depends on your project? Or is that a clarification that's less appropriate for code language? I guess I would want to make clear that this is not in lieu of accessibility requirements. These are minimum room sizes. Among minimum room size considerations, accessibility may be a factor. Is there a way that we should capture that, or is that inappropriate for code language because it's a clarification?
That was kind of my point, Josh, is I wanted to respond that in no way did I mean to say that these are never subject to accessibility. They're oftentimes will be, but when we're having a discussion about getting the minimum room size down, that has, no real bearing on the requirements for the accessibility. They're still going to have to meet all those. So they may not be able to go as small as we allow in this uncomfortable world that Todd brought up.
Use a
So I
different
just
term
wanted
if
to
you want, but
clarify
I'm
that.
just trying to challenge us.
I appreciate that, Tim, and that makes sense. Do you guys think it's worth mentioning at all, or is that something that's just not within the purview of what we're doing and the code otherwise covers it?
I can add on there. Code already covers it. Okay. I believe this is a minimum when you have to have those type of units in there. I'm exactly like Micah. I've actually looked at it too a little bit. You could fit the stuff in there. You can meet the accessibility requirements. It's small, but I mean, but it does not alleviate you from meeting the other parts of the code. So I don't think it's an issue. So myself,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Okay, so what I was thinking, if you'll entertain me here, if we go back to the spreadsheet, take all this and you see the list right there in two. So facilities, plumbing, kitchen, bathroom. Can we go back and kind of debate each one of these little activities, kind of come to some sort of threshold for that activity. And then if we look at those all together, we might be able to then say, well, some of these can overlap in use, right? It's not just a straight spreadsheet exercise, but is that okay? Like if I throw out there, let's talk about sleeping area. Um, is that defined anywhere? Do we just simply say it's a twin bed size? So that means something to someone. I'll just put it out there and then see what we get here. Hoyt. Hoyt, do you need to unmute? Okay, we'll come back. Josh.
Yeah, so don't mean to drag the conversation back, but just two quick things I want to do in wrap up before we kind of move on here. Have we ever discussed where exactly this is going to live? Are we trying to make this an appendix that's adoptable? Is this going to just live in the WAC? And the reason I ask is just as we, consider saying, hey, other parts of the code covers it, and I think it does. One consideration is, do we need to reference any code to tie it together? Is this an IBC amendment, or is this a separate WAC that needs to say you are also subject to the IBC requirements? I'm not sure if we've determined that.
Anyone? I don't remember.
I think it specifically tells us in the state building code we have to reduce the dwelling unit size. So I think it has to happen in the IBC, and for that matter, because it's not objectionable objection. It's not something that jurisdictions get to choose to do or not choose to do. It's required no matter what. I don't think appendix is the right answer.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's kind of been where we've been running with it all along, is targeting 1208 is kind of where I've been targeting most of this.
Thank
That
you,
makes sense, Josh?
Yeah, it does. And that makes sense how if we're doing these as amendments, then we're very, very clear. I would maybe suggest, I don't know if today's the day, but we get to a point where we're assigning specific sections for people to put forth some edited language on instead of doing it in this open forum fashion.
Okay. Okay, now can we entertain the activities? And if it doesn't work, we don't have to follow through, but go ahead, Micah.
I do kind of want to ask on assignments and development of code language. Would that be appropriate to wait on those until the period for requested proposals closes? Again, I don't want to put it in a negative way, but I wouldn't want the tag to get a bias towards tag work until we get information from others. That's just a thought. Thanks.
Can you define when you say a bias towards tag work? What does that mean?
In other words, if when I do and everybody has their own biases towards their work. So if you have a tag member that goes and does a bunch of work and they develop a bunch of code language and then somebody else puts a proposal in other words, you're going to be biased towards your own code language. Sometimes people can do better and they might switch it, but that's what I mean is, do you want to do a bunch of work that may already be done by others based on the proposals that may come in during that time frame? That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, this one's tricky, Micah, right? Because we're all used to tags responding to external petitions, right? That's kind of our purpose here. And on these legislative mandates, we're also kind of using the tag to develop. So it is a good question how we want to approach this for external petitions or have more authorship than normal on this. So, okay, Tim.
In the spirit of what Micah just said there, I mean, I think we've identified the issues now with the combination of Josh's table of contents and what Dustin's put together here on this topic summary. I think we have enough already now to go out for proposals. We're looking for proposals for these things. But in regards to what you were discussing and going through the different issues, I think the first one you mentioned was kitchen and what is considered kitchen. I think right now the way dwelling unit says what we need is it says a permanent provision or permanent provisions for eating, sleeping, and cooking. So it's a permanent cooking appliance that we would have to make the determination on, and if it's met through either the proposal that comes in or through um, what we want to decide now of what do we consider a permanent cooking facility.
So do you want to take that on first? That's what I was wondering, because that really determines a lot of things, right?
Yeah, and I know that Seattle's specifically by policy or others mentions at least a microwave. So Seattle's taken the stance, from my understanding, and definitely Mike will jump in, but that a microwave would comply to meet the requirements for a permanent cooking facility.
And we had kind of joked about this, right? Because we don't want to be so 2000 or whatever we said, 2025.
Yeah,
So I mean, because we can define, that we're going to have a induction plate or whatever, and then or a microwave, and that might just be what it is, and that doesn't have the off gassing and so forth. And is that
yeah,
how people want to approach it?
yeah. I think, having the electrical ability for them to install a appliance is definitely a requirement that we need to uphold within this rule. But I don't know if we should approach what that appliance has to be.
Well, we've got to be careful. I mean, we're going to run into our common trap of EPCA stuff, but I mean, it in this case, it actually does matter because it really defines the ventilation sizes or the exhaust sizes, and who can tell us then how that relates to actual physical space, if any. Go ahead, just keep cycling through. I can call on people, or we can kind of jump in and be a little
Oh,
more.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll jump in. Actually, I don't think we should actually write it exactly for some of the reasons that Micah says. We could be a little biased. I think the role of this tag should be they should they should submit the proposal, just like we do everything. We could do minor edits. If there's something we see, oh, we need to change this or something like that. Almost very similar to like what the um, ICC process does. I think because I think we will get challenged if we actually write it and then we approve it. That's my personal opinion. I think if we're going to go this, but we let proposals be submitted. I don't know if Dustin, that's something that could be put on the website or something. Um, and that's what I think. I have a hard time saying if I say someone, they say, well, why'd you pick that? And I go, well, based on my experience, I think this was a good idea. I think that's a very poor argument compared to like, you gave me something, then based on my experience, I felt that was a valid way it was written. I feel that's my opinion. Um, so
So
wanted to get that out.
So a couple quick things I want to jump in with. This is Josh. Some of this is a little different than how I understood it. If we're soliciting proposals on the code language, what is our solicitation? We're putting something out, asking for these proposals. I guess that I don't know why we're here. I would also point out that it says in the language of the bill as approved, the State Building Code Council shall convene a technical advisory group for the purpose of recommending amendments to the International Building Code. I thought we were going to recommend amendments and solicit those for comment. If we're not doing that, I don't know what we're doing. I mean, what is this that we're soliciting out to the public? If we're asking the public to write it and then we comment on it, then we've wasted a lot of time.
No. I don't think that's really what I'm saying is like, we have something here, right?
What is that we have?
Oh, I'm just saying, I'm looking at the screen, right? Well, what I'm saying, just kind of looking at this. What I'm saying is the way I understand it now, is if we're going to do this, as the state building code council that we're doing this tag technical advisory group, we accepted this stuff. I think we should be accepting proposals. I really, unless Dustin, you correct me, but typically we don't completely write the code
Well,
that needs to be adopted by the state. Am I wrong on that?
point
Or-
that's what I was saying. That typically we respond to petitions as a technical advisory group, but this case, just like on the single exit, I think we were treating this tag as a little more with a little more
Okay.
authorship. But if anyone was uncomfortable with that, I mean, I don't necessarily. I hear, Mike, and others that you want to go out for, external petitions. I think we're just inviting external petitions and internal petitions and trying to move forward, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying only go out for external petitions, but I think that's the transparency part of this. In
Mhm.
addition, that email has already gone out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dustin, I'm looking at it from Wednesday at
Yep.
11.
Didn't
It
didn't we?
says that the SBCC is
Yep.
convening a tag for the temporary shelters and minimum dwelling unit sizes and requesting proposals. We'll be accepting proposals through December 31st. So that email has already been publicly noticed. So that
But
was my
didn't
request for discussion. Thanks.
Micah, then I thought we talked about, I'm trying to remember. So I
Yeah.
thought maybe we discussed this and said we're going to open it up and then, but still be active. We're not going to,
So,
necessarily take no
so
action. Go ahead.
also in that
Sure.
email, it says that petitions will be reviewed by the tag as they're received. So the intent was not to pause all work by this group while we wait for proposals to come in, but to put what we have out there for folks to write proposals on. If we come through today and we made some modifications to our topic summary, if we had some suggested proposals for 1208, that could get published out and proposals could be written on that with, ideas coming in. But when I put that out there, the plan was for this group to develop language and then also invite the public to participate in the process so that if they had great ideas for us to consider, we could hear them coming from outside of the group as well. So the next part of that one, I do need to get the news bulletins on our homepage updated, but that Gov delivery did go out calling for proposals for the dwelling unit size and temporary emergency shelters yesterday.
Right. And I wasn't asking or requesting that you pause all work.
No,
Josh, you just
didn't take
mentioned
that, so.
doing assignments to all of you and doing a bunch of work. I was just saying maybe you don't want to go so far down as doing a whole bunch of work if you're going to be getting proposals. That was all. You could say it's not a problem, but the request has been sent out for proposals. Just wanted to verify that. Thanks.
It's good to talk through.
And sure, that does make sense, but I gotta admit, the direction through this process has been pretty poor, and I'm having a hard time understanding what we should be doing. If right now what we're saying, we have something for people to look at that we've prepared, we've got like 6 lines in an Excel sheet. We have nothing. I would suggest we would maybe take some of this conversation we've had, put it together in a way that's summarized that somebody can understand who wasn't in our meetings, that says, hey, these are the areas we've identified that we anticipate would need the most work, and make that available to people if we are waiting for proposals. It just seems like I've heard 3 or 4 different plans here, and I'm hoping that we can get to some kind of plan, because we've been running round and round, and I don't mean to be, rude or brash. I'm just trying to get us to the point, because I don't think anyone's willing to say the hard truth that we're running round and round, and we need to either do something or wait for something. But hopping on once a week to kind of talk about warm and fuzzies about this stuff is not really getting us any sort of progress. I think it was great as an initial, shotgun approach of looking at everything and getting the issues out there. But I think from here, I'm really suggesting we need to decide, are we putting together some language? Are we not? Do we have assignments? Do we not? Are we waiting for proposals? Is this week just a weekly check-in to see if we've gotten proposals? And on that note, as I hear all of this, we're also on a tight timeline. So this whole hurry up and wait thing, I don't really think is all that productive.
All right. Message heard. Thank you, Joshua. Don't disagree. That's the point. We can put pen to paper right now, and by no means are we waiting. So let's just start getting it done. And I agree with you. It took us a while to wrap our heads around what we're doing, because we're interpreting a legislative mandate. Okay, I think we better understand it now than we did even last time we talked. I thought we made a lot of progress last time. So yes, let's put pen to paper right now, and invite external petitions. I do not want us to wait, and also we're wasting time talking about process. So let's just get going. So if with that, I'm going to come back to, can somebody define one of the verbs, I'm going to call them, one of the living area, the sleeping area, the whatever it is. We started talking about the kitchen. Let's just dial in on something. So you want to talk about the the definition of the kitchen and the appliances and so forth. That helps gives us some actual dimensions around that. Okay, go ahead, Sean.
Well, instead of dictating the specific cooking equipment, maybe consider just requiring a 20 amp uh, dedicated circuit for cooking appliances.
I think, well, I'm curious, Sean. I'm raising the question. I'm not the expert in this space, but I think it has other um, different requirements depending on what type of cooking we're talking about here, right? If we're allowing a full stove in there or something, then we have different space and exhaust requirements than if we're allowing a microwave or a cooktop or a
Sure,
induction plate, right?
but isn't it exempt if it's a plug-in appliance?
I don't know. What are we worried about? We want worried about moisture from boiling water? Are we worried about fumes? What are we worried about here? Can someone tell us?
I think the interpretation is that most building officials interpret a permanent provision for cooking to be something permanently installed, like a stove in between cabinets, not necessarily something that could be removed from the counter space. That's been where my kind of rub is lying on it. Now, I agree that a 20 amp service or a outlet there for a cooking type appliance, be it a hot plate, induction plate, or a microwave, or other, um, would probably solve the need. But maybe dedicated space on the counter plus the receptacle might be something that gets us past that permanent provision for cooking. The permanent plug, the permanent space there. That's there. Of course, they could put whatever they want on the counter, but if they have the space to put the appliance, that might be considered a permanent provision for cooking.
Yeah, I guess
Dave.
my overall heartburn is just still like, I mean, this will apply to everything now. So even, a room above your garage type deal, is it an accessory dwelling unit or is it just a man cave? Now, as soon as you provide an outlet, I guess it's an accessory dwelling unit or it's a dwelling unit of some sort. So it just has so many more amplifications, beyond just this minimum size. But I think that's a good route to go for what we're discussing. And if our task is to amend the dwelling unit size in the state building code, um, I'm still a little confused on whether or not that truly does modify the IRC code. But I think the plugin, the safety of it, the venting, all of that is another one of those areas where we're not getting rid of anything. If you do put in a range, then absolutely you got to meet the requirements for a range hood. But if you just put in the
Mhm.
plug-in for a plug-in countertop appliance, you don't have to, but we don't need to get into that per se. As far as living areas, the only thing I'm aware of in the code is the minimum, you have to have one room within each dwelling that meets a minimum square footage of 70 square feet.
Mhm.
And then there's room dimensions, if I remember correctly, too. But anyway, it usually comes down to a minimum of 70 square foot room within the space. Sleeping, it doesn't specify that it has to be at a different room than your minimum room. So your sleeping and your living room can already be the same room. Eating, again, doesn't specify that has to be a separate room. So those can already be in the same room. And then cooking and sanitation. The sanitation one, I definitely think, there's got to be a requirement that that's isolated off somehow for nothing else moisture and um, other control mechanisms.
One thing I'll throw out there as we're looking at this, one of the things the bill calls us to do is to reconcile elements of the National Healthy Housing Standard. And it has all of these definitions on page 11. It talks about a range shall include an oven unless both a separate oven other than a microwave oven and a cooktop are provided. A hot plate is not an acceptable substitute for burners on a range or cooktop. The range or cooktop shall have vertical clearance not less than 30 inches. I would propose we try to match the National Healthy Housing Standard for some of these kitchen requirements that can then influence our minimum room sizes. I mean, I'm open to conversation if we want to try to go beyond this, but it seems that what we're supposed to do is try to marry these documents in a way that doesn't have some of these implications you're bringing up, Tim. We don't want to inadvertently change the rules for everything outside of these accessibility area, or sorry, not accessibility, gosh, out of these efficiency dwelling units. And maybe what we need to do is, and I'll look to you guys for more experience in writing code. In my inexperienced view, I'd say, oh, well, we'll just put an exception for efficiency dwelling units wherever this is relevant, and now we have it specific to efficiency dwelling units. But I know there's stickier things with code writing, so I'm interested what folks think of that to avoid the issue Tim's talking about without just taking over the conversation. But I want to throw those few ideas out there if anyone had any thought.
The one thought that I always throw out there is you never want requirements within the definitions. It's a recipe for disaster. Basically, nobody knows about them. So I wouldn't want to like make an exception to a definition. So I think we would have to put that exception somewhere in, like, say when we reduce the minimum room size, somewhere in 1208 that says, you know, an exception to not meet the full definition of dwelling unit, as previously described. You have to do this, that, or the other. And I think that's where the Seattle proposal or their administrative determination comes from, is they add it in there as specific requirements for an efficiency dwelling unit.
Yeah,
I
that's
totally agree,
I
Tim.
want to
That's
agree
what
with
it
that.
says.
Yeah, I'm exactly with Tim on that too. He's absolutely right. I do like the way Seattle has it too, from someone who's read through it and gone through it, and I think it's so.
Just to jump in real quick, when we talk about these definitions, I'm definitely not talking about changing a definition because I'm not seeing a definition in the IBC for kitchen.
Oh no, it's in the previous one that he had pulled up, which was the dwelling unit definition, the permanent provision for cooking. If we wanted to adjust that to what you're talking about in the healthy housing and or just a plug-in, I would suggest that we make that an exception under chapter 12, but not mess with the definition or put an exception in there.
Yeah,
Agreed. I totally misunderstood. Thank you,
okay.
Tim.
Yeah, that's what I was talking to too, just to let you know.
It makes sense. Go
And
ahead,
that's
Michael.
exactly where I'm proposing we would put any of this. The question posed was what needs to be in the kitchen to be complete. We have a list from the document we're supposed to use as a reference that tells us what needs to be in the kitchen. I would think that we would want to use that.
Let's come right back to that because that was my question too, Micah. Go ahead.
I'm actually going to discuss that. In my opinion, that may be going backwards. The update to this National Healthy Housing Standard occurred in 2018. The document was originally produced, I think, in 2014, 2011, discussions, things like that. A lot has occurred with induction, cooktops, and things like that in the last 7 years. So I definitely think that just because it says to go with the National Healthy Housing Standard, not everyone wants to put in a range or the power for it, depending on the size, whether that's a fossil fuel or a 40 amp double pole, whatever, 30 amp, whatever it takes for a full size range in a residential structure. I think we need to evaluate some of these things in determination with modern technology. I agree that the National Healthy Housing Standard should be used, but it is fairly outdated for some advanced technologies. That's just my word of caution.
I think that makes sense. And if I can say the things that would make me uncomfortable is obviously if you get rid of a sink. I don't think anyone's proposing we get rid of a sink with hot and cold water, right? So let's just, for purposes of our discussion, I think we can agree on that. Can we get rid of food storage? Do you have to have a refrigerator? I don't know. It's in here, right? I thought.
Refrigerators in there, yeah, with a
Yep.
fridge.
Do we agree with that?
Yes.
Do we want a refrigerator?
Yes.
Okay, just saying it out loud. Okay. What else? Cooking appliance. Do we have to have a cooking appliance? I mean, if someone wanted to really strip this all the way down, do we need cooking?
Yes.
Does anyone disagree?
I think
it's a question for me.
I'll answer. I'll give you my 2 cents on that. That's going to come down to if the tag wants to change the definition of a dwelling unit, because that has been fairly standard for a really, really long time. So if you don't have permanent provisions for cooking, there will be folks that interpret this as not being a complete dwelling unit.
Oh,
That's
I
a
agree. I
concern I
mean,
have. So
and that's kind of
that's
my
where you
point.
got to determine
That's why I said yes.
We
that's
got
why
way
I'm
to his
saying you got
uncomfortable
to
spot.
determine, again, you got to get to the uncomfortable spot. Are we changing the definition from permanent provisions for cooking to just some type of appliance for cooking? That's why I'm asking. I think it goes further than your question, Todd. You're going to have to get down to. I don't think we can provide you the direct answer because that's going to determine if you want to change these definitions or change the intent of them overall, and then you could get an answer.
Well, I thought that's what we were talking about, where Tim suggested that we're not changing the definition. So we're in chapter 12, we'd be putting an exception, said if we got to a point we're comfortable with, not that you don't have to provide cooking, do you get to go to a lower area? Just a question. If you do put cooking in there, you might you're going to have that area for that cooking and for that exhaust and all those other things, right? But that would
So
be an
you're putting an
exception.
exception. You're talking about something like an exception to the definition,
I know, but
which I
not in
know
chapter two,
it's
though.
I
In
know
chapter
not chapter
12.
2, but that's what you're saying it is.
I know.
So that's all. That's what I'm trying to clarify. You were talking about if we're developing language, then that's developing language. That's you got to look at all the areas. So that's why I'm asking things.
Okay, thanks. Go
So
ahead, Josh.
I'm wondering, what part of the IBC are we discussing editing? I'm digging through, and again, I'm a structural guy, so this first half is not my jam. But if we're changing these provisions or proposing changing provisions to the kitchen, what are the current IBC provisions for the kitchen? If it's only what's contained within that definition, then I don't know that we would need to change that unless we're adding a new section that says, hey, efficiency dwelling units have new requirements for a kitchen that we previously didn't have, or is there a section of the IBC that we should be looking at editing instead of starting from scratch?
So my take is it doesn't define a kitchen like what you said. I've never seen a proposal for a kitchen without a sink. But if somebody wanted to put in a kitchen without a sink in a different space right now, there would be nothing that stopped them from doing that.
Is it our call right now to try to prevent that for the efficiency dwelling units?
I don't think so. I think those are self-regulating tools within, society that dictate the norms. But yeah, I wouldn't want to see one without a kitchen next week, which I think that's all of our fear is as you try to get these smaller and smaller. I almost think we create a separate section in 1208. And I think, I may be on the short end of this, but when the legislation says we have to allow dwelling units to be less than 190 square feet, I feel like we can create rules for those dwelling units that are less than 190 square feet, kind of like an efficiency dwelling unit. I don't think we need to let it affect every dwelling unit. I think it can be its own thing, but it just needs to be in 1208 where we define what those interior space dimensions are.
That makes good sense because we're being more restrictive because we're allowing a smaller space.
Or less restrictive in regards to a cooking appliance.
Sure. Well, and right now, if somebody can help me, and maybe we don't have this off the top of our heads, but what are the current requirements for cooking? Or is it literally just within this definition that says you need permanent provisions and that's open to interpretation?
That's it, open to interpretation.
I think that's why it's good to have both the healthy standards up here and our code, because the code is just says cooking.
Sure. And maybe we do want, if we're saying, hey, if we're making this a minimum and we are concerned that you're going to skimp on the kitchen, maybe we say, hey, if you're going to this size, you need to have at least these requirements. I personally think it's fair to say, hey, you have new requirements if you're going this small. And I kind of like what Tim's saying and agree with putting a section for a reduced dwelling size. I don't know, again, the exact right code way to appropriately handle that. Maybe this section is just largely follow these provisions in section 120 whatever, follow these follow these. Here you can do this different. Here you can do this different. And everywhere else it kind of sends us where we need to go, or maybe a blanket statement that says, all code provisions apply unless specifically, stated here. I don't know the exact right code language to that, but I think this is an interesting point that we'll want to chase down when coming up with proposing language is I guess I like what Tim's saying, putting another section to 1208, and then we can kind of decide what we're needing to put in, as opposed to like what Micah pointed out, we don't want to, and Tim pointed out, we don't want to inadvertently affect the whole code. Does anyone have any objections to what Tim was saying? I think that's a great idea.
I think so, but go ahead, Micah.
Kind of have objections to what Tim's saying. Sorry, Tim. Because I think I'm working on a proposal to go the other direction to simplify. When we look at the National Healthy Housing Standard, talks about the habitable space of 70 square feet. That is much smaller than is what currently allowed for the one room that's required to be 120 square feet, i.e. that's how we got to the 190. Before I get too far into that, let me ask you a question I don't remember. And are we starting with the 2024 language? Is that correct? Are we starting with the existing 2021 language, Dustin?
We're working with the 2021 language and amendments, and then what we have on our draft here for the current language, it's got both. Any updates that were made in the 2024 are carried over into this document as well.
Okay, perfect. The only reason I asked that is because my name was on that proposal that wrote the 2024 language. They modified it to the 190 and modified the efficiency dwelling unit to the 190. So I think, Tim, you mentioned it where you could be smaller in efficiency dwelling unit. Right now you can't. Previously, you were required to be bigger than the dwelling unit allowance if you did an efficiency dwelling unit. And I think Josh's questions asking about code language, I want to say that before you develop a lot of code language, you need to decide if the smaller size is even going to allow for an efficiency dwelling unit. And in other words, if you're making it, if you're blurring the lines and saying you only need one habitable room of 70 square feet, I think that was part of Mr. Neiman's proposal previously. I believe he's on if he wants to correct me. But if you only had one habitable space required to be 70 square feet, efficiency dwelling unit really goes away because by definition, that's the dwelling unit, everything's in one room. So, I mean, if it were up to me making some proposals, which I'd like to coming up, you would almost eliminate efficiency dwelling unit requirements. You would go the opposite, simplify it, where you pick a number, whether that's 120, 150 from the CDU, the small efficiency dwelling unit director's rule from Seattle, or some other number, and that's what you make any dwelling unit, whether it has 1 room, 2 room, 5 room. But of course, one of those rooms would need to meet that minimum standard of whether that's 120 or 150. Outside of that, it wouldn't be relevant. And why I say that is we just passed a proposal in the residential code to do exactly that. The SBCC, the tags approved a change that says a residential dwelling shall have 1 room that's 120 square feet of habitable space. That's it. They made it irrelevant what's in those other rooms. So if you're going to align with something like that, that's the decision you need to make before you create other code language. Or, in my opinion, if you're going to add another small or efficiency dwelling unit item, I think it's making it more complicated, which I think the idea was to move to less complicated with this process.
Okay. No, I think that's good, Mike, and it's probably a good ending point. We only have 2 minutes left. So I think what we should take from this is windows open. So let's submit proposals. I think a lot of them will be from this internal group. Let's reach out and get external ideas, and they don't have to be complete proposals for the whole thing. Let's just get sections going if that's what's appropriate so we can start responding to them. So we kind of opened up the kitchen and cooking aspect of it here. We obviously haven't talked about sanitation or bathroom yet, but in that spirit, let's I propose that we get some actual language submitted, and let's do it through the official SBCC website, and then Dustin and team can track that. Is that okay with everyone? So next time we come together, and whenever it's going to be 2 or 3 weeks, gets to the holiday,
yeah, it's fine with me.
We're trying to find our thresholds.
Just a clarification, are we individually putting these together and submitting them and then reviewing them as a tag, or is the proposal that we have something we're bringing together to have tag proposals
No,
Fine either way. I just want to be clear.
it's a good question. However you want to do it. I was thinking individually that we just, from this conversation, we spring off this and put down on paper what we interpreted today and then debate.
I
Go
know
ahead.
we're out of time. My only thought is I would just be worried we all send a proposal on the same section and then we're just right back to where we were unless we break things out into some form of assignment responsibility.
We could. I guess I was saying I'm okay with that because we'll see the difference between a Hoyt proposal and a Micah proposal, and it'll be all obvious to us where we're uncomfortable.
Fair enough.
And I really think it might boil down to only amending like 3 sections. So it's if we could do 1 section of meeting, we'd be set.
We'd be done. No, I think it's a good point, Tim. I agree. I think we'll get to a couple sticky points, and I think the rest of them will be pretty obvious. Go ahead, David.
Just maybe a dumb question, but do I need to resubmit my proposal through this official means, or am I done?
You're done. That one's still on our books.
Okay,
great.
So, and that's reasonable, right, Dustin? We can get those all posted then as they come in.
Yes.
For next week. Okay.
It'll be a spreadsheet similar to the other proposals for the group 1, group 2, and we'll just keep them out there.
Okay. I think we did make progress, but thank you, everyone, Josh, for those comments. So, okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.